My grandson pushed me down the stairs. They laughed and called me dramatic. 2 weeks later, I made them regret it. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. This is a story about finding strength when you're at your weakest and reclaiming your power when the people who should love you the most betray you instead. The porcelain vase shattered across my hardwood floor, its delicate blue and white pieces scattering like confetti. 5 generations of Matthew's women had cherished that vase. Now it lay destroyed at the feet of my 10-year-old grandson, Jason, his face twisted in that unsettling half-smile I'd grown to dread. "Oops," he said flatly, eyes challenging me to react. My son Daniel barely looked up from his phone. "It's just a vase, Mom. Just a vase. Like my grandmother was just an immigrant who carried it across an ocean. Like my mother was just a widow who refused to sell it during the Depression." "Jason needs clearer boundaries," I said during dinner, my voice shakier than I wanted. "This behavior isn't normal." Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, set down her wineglass with exaggerated care. "Not this again, Ellie. Boys will be boys. He's been hurting neighborhood animals," I pressed. "Mrs. Peterson saw him throwing rocks at her cat." "That old bat needs glasses," Vanessa snapped. "And you need to stop criticizing my parenting." Daniel, forever the peacemaker at the expense of truth, smiled weakly. "Let's just enjoy dinner, okay?" Later that evening, I carried my tea tray upstairs, my arthritis making each step a deliberate act. My once elegant Victorian home in suburban Boston had become a battleground since I'd invited Daniel's family to live upstairs after Richard's death 5 years ago. As I reached the top landing, a small figure emerged from the shadows. "Nobody believes you anyway," Jason whispered, face illuminated by the dim hallway light. Something cold and calculating flashed in eyes too young for such malice. I felt a sharp push against my back, deliberate, forceful. The tea tray went flying as I tumbled backward, my body helpless against gravity. Each stair edge bit into my flesh as I fell. The crack of bone, my wrist, sent lightning pain up my arm. "Mom!" Daniel shouted, rushing from the kitchen. Through tears of agony, I managed to speak. "He pushed me. Jason pushed me on purpose." Daniel and Vanessa exchanged glances, not of concern, but exasperation. Vanessa actually rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic, Ellie," she sighed. "Jason says you tripped. Accidents happen at your age." I watched my grandson peek around the corner, that same half-smile playing on his lips. "I know what happened," I insisted, cradling my shattered wrist. Daniel helped me to my feet with ungentle haste. "Mom, maybe this is a sign we should consider other living arrangements, somewhere with professional care. You've been confused lately, imagining things." As they drove me to the hospital, a cold realization settled in my bones, more painful than my broken wrist. My family wasn't just disbelieving me, they were actively conspiring against me. In their narrative, I was just a confused old woman, an inconvenient obstacle between them and what they considered their inheritance. The cast encasing my wrist felt like a shackle, a constant reminder of my helplessness. 2 weeks after the accident, as they insisted on calling it, I shuffled through my bedroom, noticing small changes. My jewelry box slightly ajar, family photos rearranged. The worn leather journal where I'd been writing my memoirs moved from desk to bookshelf. I wasn't losing my mind. They were gaslighting me. "Need anything, Mom?" Daniel hovered in my doorway, his concern a thin veneer over impatience. "I'm fine," I murmured, the lie bitter on my tongue. After he left, I noticed the assisted living brochure peeking from beneath yesterday's newspaper. So subtle, so deliberate. That afternoon, I called Beatrice, my oldest friend from the neighborhood. At 75, she'd embraced technology with a fervor I'd always found amusing. Now, her expertise might save me. "They think I'm going senile," I whispered into the phone, afraid of being overheard in my own home. Beatrice arrived the next day bearing what looked like innocuous decorative items. A vintage clock, a bookend, a small picture frame. Each contained a tiny camera. "Military grade," she whispered with unexpected glee. "My nephew works in security." That night, we placed the cameras strategically around my bedroom and the common areas. My hands trembled, not from age, but from the terrible suspicion of what I might discover. The next morning, reviewing the footage on the secure tablet Beatrice had configured, I watched Jason slip into my room at dawn. He moved with practiced stealth, immediately targeting my jewelry box. His small fingers extracted my sapphire earrings, Richard's last Christmas gift before cancer took him. But the real shock came hours later. Footage showed Vanessa examining the earrings in the kitchen, nodding approvingly before pocketing them herself. "Good eye, sweetie," she told Jason, ruffling his hair. "These are worth at least $1,000. My breath caught painfully in my chest. Over the next week, the cameras revealed an orchestrated campaign. Jason regularly invaded my space, taking items both valuable and sentimental. Daniel accidentally spilled coffee on my manuscript. 40 years of research on women poets of the Victorian era. Vanessa moved my medications, claiming I'd misplaced them myself when I couldn't find them. The final straw came during Sunday brunch with their friends. Jason brought his classroom's pet hamster for the weekend. In my bathroom, the camera captured him holding the terrified creature underwater, his expression curious rather than cruel, as if death were simply an interesting experiment. When the animal stopped moving, Vanessa helped him dispose of the evidence. "We'll tell Mrs. Evans it escaped," she said calmly. "These things happen." That night, I overheard them through my slightly opened door. "The house would sell for at least $1.2 million in this market," Vanessa whispered. "Plus, whatever's left of her savings and investments. And Jason's college fund," Daniel added. "Almost $350,000 now." "She's not going to need any of it in a nursing home," Vanessa replied. I closed my eyes, a strange calm replacing my fear. In that moment, Eleanor Matthews, widow, professor emerita, mother, grandmother, died, and someone new, someone with nothing left to lose, was born in her place. "The pain still bothers you?" Dr. Sheldon asked, examining my healing wrist. "The physical pain is manageable," I replied carefully. Something in my tone made her pause. She was young for an orthopedist, maybe 40, with keen eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Matthews, is everything all right at home?" For a moment, I considered telling her everything, but what could she do? Call Adult Protective Services? Without proof, it would be my word against theirs, a contest I'd already lost once. "I'm fine," I said automatically. As I gathered my purse to leave, Dr. Sheldon handed me a business card. "This is Caroline Winters. She's a social worker who specializes in elder rights." "I don't need—" "Just take it," she interrupted gently. "Sometimes talking helps." I slipped the card into my pocket where it burned like a hot coal. 3 days later, after Vanessa helpfully suggested I sign power of attorney over to Daniel, I found myself in Caroline's office, a warm space filled with plants and comfortable chairs. "Elder abuse takes many forms," Caroline explained, her voice matter of fact. "Financial exploitation is actually more common than physical abuse." "I'm not being abused," I protested weakly. Caroline's smile was kind, but knowing. "Then why are you here, Eleanor?" That simple question broke something inside me. The story poured out: Jason's cruelty, Vanessa's manipulation, Daniel's betrayal, the cameras, the college fund they were already counting as theirs. "I've lost everything," I concluded. Exhausted. My dignity, my family, my home. "Not yet, you haven't," came a voice from the doorway. A tall, silver-haired woman with impeccable posture stood there, radiating the kind of confidence I'd once possessed myself. "Eleanor, this is Martha Sullivan," Caroline introduced us. "She leads our support group." Martha sat beside me, taking my trembling hands in her steady ones. 2 years ago, my son and his wife tried to commit me to a memory care facility for the crime of refusing to sell my beach house to fund their failing business. "What did you do?" I asked. Martha's smile was fierce. "I reminded them that age isn't a disease, and being underestimated is a temporary condition." That afternoon, I attended my first support group. The stories stunned me. Educated, accomplished men and women being systematically stripped of their agency by the very people who should protect them. Martha introduced me to George Harrington, a silver-haired attorney who specialized in elder law. "Your case is unfortunately common," George said during our consultation, "but with some uncommon elements that work in our favor." "Such as?" "The college fund. Tell me about its origins." I explained how James, my first husband and Daniel's father, had established it before his premature death when Daniel was 14. Richard, my second husband, had continued contributing to it. Now it contained nearly $350,000, with me as sole trustee. George leaned forward. "Here's what they don't know, Eleanor. That money is legally designated for educational purposes, but as trustee, You have considerable latitude in how those purposes are defined. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of something beyond fear. Not quite hope, but its dangerous cousin, possibility. They think you're deteriorating mentally? George clarified, making notes in his leather-bound portfolio. That's what they're telling everyone, I confirmed, sliding the assisted living brochures across his desk. Vanessa leaves these everywhere, then gaslights me when I mention them. We sat in George's oak-paneled office, surrounded by law books and the quiet competence of generations of legal practice. With Martha's encouragement, I'd expanded my documentation. A journal recording daily incidents, video evidence meticulously backed up on external drives, and photographs of items Jason had stolen. Perfect, George nodded. Now we move to phase 2, strategic compliance. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. I would appear to be declining exactly as they expected. I would become slightly more forgetful, a bit more dependent, occasionally confused about dates or names. Give them the false confidence they need to make mistakes, Martha had advised during one of our now regular coffee meetings. People reveal themselves when they think they're winning. I implemented the plan immediately. At breakfast, I forgot which day it was. When Vanessa mentioned an upcoming school event for Jason, I appeared momentarily bewildered. Mom's getting worse, I overheard Daniel tell Vanessa that night. Maybe we should accelerate our timeline. Their timeline. My opening. The next morning at the bank, I met with Thomas Bradley, my financial advisor for 20 years. Someone's been attempting to access your accounts. Eleanor, he confirmed gravely, using your social security number and claiming to have power of attorney. My son, I said, the words like ash in my mouth. Thomas's expression hardened. We denied access, of course. Under George's guidance, I began restructuring my assets. Nothing dramatic enough to raise alarms, just enough to secure what was mine. Meanwhile, at home, I leaned into my role. When Vanessa suggested I sign some routine paperwork, I smiled vaguely and promised to look at it later. When Daniel mentioned selling some of my antiques to simplify my life, I appeared to consider the idea. You're making it too easy, Mom, Daniel said suspiciously after one such conversation. I'm just tired of fighting, I replied, infusing my voice with defeat. You know what's best. The flicker of guilt across his face was quickly replaced by resolution, the moral calculus of a man justifying betrayal. That night, Jason reached a new level of cruelty. As I reached for my heart medication, I found the bottle empty. Looking for these? He appeared in my doorway, dangling the pills in his small hand. Old people take too many drugs, that's what Mom says. Jason, please. I need those. Say please again, like you're begging. His eyes gleamed with anticipation. That moment crystallized everything. This wasn't just about money or property. They were systematically destroying me, my grandson through deliberate cruelty, my daughter-in-law through calculated manipulation, and my son through the most devastating weapon of all, indifference. Later, alone in my room, I studied an old photograph from my teaching days. In it, a confident woman with direct eyes and perfect posture stood before a lecture hall, commanding respect without demanding it. Taking a deep breath, I called the number Martha had given me for emergencies. It's time, I said simply. They've escalated. We're ready, Martha replied. The question is, are you? Grandma, when are you going to die? Jason's question, delivered over breakfast with the same inflection he might use to ask for more orange juice, silenced the kitchen. I carefully set down my teacup, noting how even Daniel seemed briefly uncomfortable. Jason, he scolded without conviction. That's not appropriate. Vanessa merely smirked, buttering her toast. He's just curious, Daniel. Children are naturally inquisitive about life cycles. I smiled at my grandson, channeling the strategic compliance George and Martha had coached me on. I don't know, sweetheart. Why do you ask? Dad says we can't convert this place into a gaming room until you're gone. It's taking forever. The mask slipped from Daniel's face. Shock, then anger at being exposed, quickly replaced by uncomfortable laughter. Kids, they misunderstand everything. But he didn't deny it. That afternoon, I implemented the next phase of our plan. With Beatrice's help, we had secretly removed my most precious possessions over the past week. Family photographs, my journals, the jewelry that remained after Jason's theft, storing them safely at Martha's home. Now came the catalyst. While the family was out, I carefully planted a fabricated bank statement on my desk, showing a large withdrawal to an unnamed account. Then I left for my therapy appointment, which was actually a meeting with George and his financial team. "Everything's in place," George confirmed, sliding documents across his desk. "The Second Chances Foundation is officially established as a restricted educational fund. All we need is your signature." I stared at the papers that would irrevocably transfer Jason's entire college fund, $350,000, into a charitable foundation dedicated to supporting bullying victims and seniors pursuing continuing education. "This isn't legally reversible," I verified. "Completely irrevocable," George assured me. My hand trembled slightly as I signed, not from doubt, but from the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about money. It was my declaration of independence. When I returned home, the fabricated bank statement was gone from my desk, exactly as predicted. That night, I heard Vanessa and Daniel arguing in their bedroom. "How could she withdraw that much without us knowing?" Vanessa hissed. "I don't know. The bank won't tell me anything. They keep saying I don't have authorization." "You're her son. What about the dementia angle? Can't we use that?" "I tried. They want formal documentation, medical evaluations. Then get them. That money is for Jason's future, our future." I lay in bed, listening to them plot against me, and felt a strange calm descend. They had shown me exactly who they were. Now it was time to show them who I had become. The following morning at breakfast, Vanessa couldn't contain herself. "Ellie," she began with manufactured concern, "Daniel noticed some unusual activity in your accounts. Large withdrawals. We're worried someone might be taking advantage of you." I blinked, the picture of elderly confusion. "Withdrawals? I don't remember making any withdrawals." "Exactly our concern," Daniel jumped in, relief evident in his voice. "Maybe I should start handling your finances for safety." I frowned, as if struggling to understand. "But I did move some money recently, that education fund, for Jason's college." The temperature in the room plummeted. Vanessa set down her coffee cup with a sharp clink. "What about Jason's college fund?" Her voice had lost all pretense of concern. "I donated it," I said simply, "to a wonderful educational foundation. They help bullying victims and seniors continuing their education. Isn't that lovely?" With the fund irrevocably transferred to the Second Chances Foundation, I began implementing the next phase of my plan. I subtly began removing remaining personal items from the house, documents and mementos still untouched by Jason's theft, and stored them at Martha's. During this process, I discovered something disturbing in the porcelain. Letters Daniel had written to Richard years ago, complaining about how I was controlling and never supported him. A complete distortion of reality. I had sacrificed everything for him after his father died, working 2 jobs to put him through college. Even more disturbing were medical records showing Jason had been diagnosed with conduct disorder, a serious condition characterized by persistent antisocial behavior. The reports showed doctors had recommended intensive therapy, but Vanessa had refused treatment, considering it an unnecessary stigma. The surveillance footage continued capturing evidence of Jason's behavior, including an incident where he deliberately broke several family photographs, while Vanessa simply sighed and said, "Kids will be kids," before hiding the damage. I continued my performance of cognitive decline, forgetting names, and appearing confused about dates. The strategy worked perfectly. Daniel and Vanessa relaxed their vigilance, convinced I was no longer a threat to their plans. During this time, I met secretly with Caroline, who documented signs of neglect and emotional abuse. We compiled a detailed dossier of the treatment I was receiving. "What if I'm wrong?" I confessed to Caroline during one meeting. "What if they really care about me, in their way?" Caroline gently presented our evidence and replied, "Love is shown through actions, not empty words. You deserve dignity." Ellie. Strengthened by this support, I reconnected with former colleagues from my teaching days. Many expressed shock at my situation, having been told by Daniel that I'd become reclusive by choice. Professor Walter Collins, now directing a creative writing program, was particularly outraged and offered immediate assistance. As I developed plans with my growing support network, Vanessa began more aggressively pushing me to sign property transfer documents. When I asked to consult an attorney first, she exploded. "Why do you need to complicate things? Don't you trust your own son? After everything we've done for you." This outburst happened in Caroline's presence, whom Vanessa believed was just my elderly friend. With a witness present, I finally responded calmly, Trust is a two-way street, dear, and I believe that road has been closed for some time. The shocked look on Vanessa's face confirmed it was time to execute the final phase of my plan. 2 months after the stair incident, I deliberately left a modified bank statement on my desk, suggesting I'd transferred a substantial sum to a personal account. As expected, Vanessa found it while tidying my room. That night, I overheard Vanessa and Daniel arguing heatedly about the money. Vanessa insisted Daniel confront me immediately, while he worried about complicating their plans for my transfer to a nursing home. The next morning at breakfast, Daniel approached the subject casually. "Mom, I noticed you made some transactions recently. Sure you don't want me to help manage your finances?" I appeared confused. "What transactions? What? Dear, I don't remember making any." In the following days, I watched their growing agitation as they made frantic calls, clearly trying to trace the money. Their behavior confirmed exactly what I'd suspected. They had been monitoring my accounts without permission. Finally, during a tense dinner, Vanessa couldn't contain herself any longer. "Ellie, what happened to Jason's college fund? The bank says you emptied it completely." I looked at them with innocent confusion. "Oh, that fund? Yes, I transferred it. I was worried something might happen to me, like falling downstairs, and wanted to ensure the money would be used properly." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel paled visibly while Vanessa's face contorted with barely contained fury. "What do you mean transferred? Where? That money was for Jason's education," she practically shouted. "And it still is for education," I replied calmly. "Just not exclusively his. The Second Chances Foundation will help many deserving students, especially bullying victims and seniors continuing their education." Their reactions were immediate and revealing. Vanessa exploded in accusations. Daniel alternated between anger and manipulation. And Jason, caught in the crossfire, finally showed his true nature. "You ruined everything, you stupid old woman," he screamed. "It was my money." I simply stood, looked at each of them, and said softly, "No, it wasn't your money. It was a conditional gift, an opportunity you lost through your own actions. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a bag to pack." Leaving them in shock, I returned to my room where a small suitcase was already prepared. The first phase of my plan was complete. The next morning I was gone. My room remained intact, except for a few personal items and a simple note. "Need time to think. Don't try to contact me." Initially, Daniel and Vanessa weren't concerned, convinced I'd return soon, apologetic and vulnerable. They even saw my drama as an opportunity to accelerate their plans to sell the house. But when days became a week, worry set in. Not for me, but for what my absence meant for their financial plans. Daniel tried accessing my bank accounts only to discover the passwords had been changed and a note added flagging any unauthorized access attempts for immediate reporting to authorities. Meanwhile, I was comfortably settled in an apartment arranged by Martha, just a few towns away. From there, I monitored developments through trusted neighbors and the surveillance system Beatrice helped maintain. The cameras captured revealing scenes. Vanessa and Daniel frantically searching my office for financial documents, Jason inviting friends for destructive parties, and numerous visits from real estate agents, though no sale could legally proceed without my signature. 2 weeks after my departure, I executed the next phase. George sent a formal letter notifying Daniel and Vanessa they were violating the terms of our verbal housing agreement and had 60 days to vacate the property. The letter mentioned substantial evidence of elder abuse and attempted financial fraud that would be presented to authorities if they didn't comply. The reaction was chaotic. Cameras captured Vanessa in a rage, breaking objects and screaming accusations, while Daniel appeared increasingly defeated, finally grasping the severity of their situation. My story began circulating in the community. Former colleagues from the literature department, led by Professor Collins, discreetly shared my situation in influential social circles. Neighbors who had witnessed years of disrespectful behavior from my family began openly expressing their indignation. Isolated and desperate, Daniel reported me as a potentially confused, missing elderly person, hoping authorities would return me to the care of my loving family. This backfired when Detective Sarah Jenkins received an envelope personally delivered by George. The envelope contained surveillance footage showing the abuse I'd suffered, including the stair incident, alongside complete financial and medical documentation demonstrating my competence and their manipulation attempts. After thorough investigation, Detective Jenkins located me, not to force my return, but to confirm my well-being and offer additional assistance. 3 weeks after my disappearance, I sent 3 important letters simultaneously. One to Daniel and Vanessa, another to Jason's school, and a third to Daniel's company. The letter to my family was a legal ultimatum prepared by George, detailing their options: voluntarily vacate my house within the established time frame or face formal eviction proceedings, potentially including criminal charges of elder abuse and attempted fraud. To Jason's school, I sent selected documentation of his behavior and his parents' refusal to seek psychological help, requesting a professional evaluation for the child's and his classmates' well-being, including evidence of the hamster incident and other concerning behaviors. The third letter, to the ethics department of Daniel's company, discreetly questioned his use of my personal intellectual property, academic work he had apparently incorporated into a recent marketing campaign without attribution. The effect was devastating. Within days, Daniel faced a disciplinary meeting at work. Jason's school mandated a complete psychological evaluation as a condition for continued enrollment, and George formally began legal proceedings to reclaim my property. Vanessa, finally grasping the seriousness of their situation, attempted a different approach. She arranged a meeting through mutual contacts, presenting herself as a peacemaker. During a tense lunch in a public restaurant, she alternated between emotional appeals and veiled threats. "Destroying our family won't bring you the dignity you're seeking," she argued. "Think about how this will affect your reputation when people learn you abandoned your own grandson." I remained calm and unmoved. "My dear, I didn't destroy anything. I simply stopped rebuilding what you continuously demolished. As for my reputation, perhaps you should consider your own." At the end of our meeting, Vanessa made a final, desperate attempt. She offered to return all items Jason had stolen and promised to get him help in exchange for withdrawing the eviction demands and potential charges. I considered momentarily, genuinely concerned about Jason's welfare despite everything. The problem, Vanessa, is that promises require trust, and some vases, once broken, simply can't be glued back together. Meanwhile, Daniel, facing serious professional repercussions and finally comprehending the gravity of his actions, attempted more sincere contact. In a lengthy letter, he partially admitted his mistakes, though still blaming much on stress and Vanessa's influence. My response was brief but significant. "Growing up isn't optional, Daniel. It's necessary. And it usually happens when we face the consequences of our choices, not when we avoid them." As the eviction deadline approached, family dynamics imploded completely. Daniel and Vanessa began blaming each other with explosive arguments that neighbors could hear. Jason, sensing the tension and left unsupervised, intensified his destructive behavior, culminating in a school incident resulting in temporary suspension. Observing from the safe distance provided by Martha and my support network, I faced my own moral crisis. How far had my quest for justice turned into revenge, and what was the emotional cost for everyone involved, including myself? 3 months after extensive legal proceedings, multiple hearings, and failed contestation attempts by Daniel and Vanessa, the eviction was finally executed. They were forced to leave my house, moving to a much smaller apartment across town. The public humiliation was intense, especially for Vanessa, whose real estate business suffered when the story circulated in elite social circles. Daniel, facing probation at work and a disintegrating marriage, finally sought therapy. There he began confronting toxic patterns dating back to his childhood, not due to my failings as he'd long believed, but from his own inability to establish healthy boundaries and take responsibility. Jason's mandatory psychological evaluation revealed advanced conduct disorder requiring immediate intervention. Reluctantly, Vanessa agreed to intensive therapy for her son, though she continued publicly blaming me for the trauma I'd caused the family. Having reclaimed my house, I experienced conflicting emotions walking through the empty rooms. The victory felt strangely hollow. Although I'd regained my autonomy and dignity, the price was the permanent loss of relationship with my son and grandson. Concerned about the direction my life had taken, I sought counsel from Caroline, who had become a trusted friend. "You didn't destroy your family, Ellie," she reassured me. "You simply stopped allowing them to destroy you. There's a crucial difference." During this reflection period, I received an unexpected letter from Jason, Written under therapeutic guidance, it contained a hesitant apology for the stair incident and stolen items. Though far from complete reconciliation, it was the first sign that perhaps something positive might emerge from the relationship's ashes. Among the returned items were several pieces of jewelry Jason had stolen, including a pearl necklace that belonged to my mother, a tangible reminder that not everything was permanently destroyed. Encouraged by this small progress, I channeled my energy into the Second Chances Foundation. Working with Professor Collins and other former colleagues, I developed programs specifically for children with problematic behavioral tendencies and elderly people facing family abuse. My story, carefully anonymized, became a case study in an ethics course at the local university. When invited to speak to the class as an expert consultant, I found a new vocation: educating young professionals about elder abuse signs and the importance of lifelong autonomy. During one such lecture, I noticed a familiar figure at the back of the hall, Daniel, quietly observing. He didn't approach, and I didn't publicly acknowledge his presence, but his being there suggested he might finally be beginning to understand. Meanwhile, Martha's health suddenly deteriorated, and she was hospitalized with a serious prognosis. I remained at her side daily, returning the unwavering support she had given me in my darkest moments. In this hospital setting, surrounded by life's fragility, I began considering forgiveness's true meaning, not as a gift to those who hurt me, but as release for myself. 6 months after the eviction, my life had found a new rhythm. My home, once an emotional battleground, was renovated and transformed into a welcoming space reflecting my own tastes and needs. One bedroom became a writing studio where I finally resumed the manuscript Jason had ruined. The Second Chances Foundation was flourishing, having awarded its first 10 scholarships. I found deep satisfaction in helping both traumatized youth and elderly people seeking reinvention, both groups with whom I now intimately identified. Distinguished Service to the Community, read the citation, as Mayor Thompson presented me with the Maxwell Foundation Community Leadership Award for creating educational opportunities for vulnerable populations through the Second Chances Foundation. Flashbulbs popped as I accepted the Crystal Trophy, my first public recognition since the foundation's establishment 9 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. From being dismissed as a confused old woman to receiving accolades before Boston's educational elite. In the audience sat my new circle: Martha, elegant in midnight blue; Caroline beaming proudly; George and his wife nodding approvingly; Beatrice discreetly wiping tears; Professor Collins giving me a thumbs up. Family I had chosen rather than been born to. Thank you, I began my acceptance speech. Second chances aren't just about new opportunities. They're about reclaiming your own narrative when others have tried to write your ending for you. As I spoke about elder empowerment and educational access, I noticed movement at the back of the hall. Daniel slipped in, standing awkwardly against the wall. Our eyes met briefly before I continued my address. After the ceremony, amidst congratulations and photograph requests, he approached hesitantly. "That was a wonderful speech, Mom." "Thank you for coming," I replied, surprised by his presence. "How's Jason?" Daniel's expression clouded. "Struggling. The intensive therapy program is helping, but the doctors say his condition is complicated. Years of enabling made everything worse." "How are you managing with work?" I asked, genuinely concerned despite everything. "Better. The ethics investigation was settled. I have to take corporate responsibility training, but I kept my job." He paused awkwardly. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about trust being hard to rebuild. I'd like to try, if you're willing." Before I could respond, Martha appeared at my elbow, protective as always. "Eleanor, the foundation donors are waiting to meet you. This is my son, Daniel," I introduced them. "Daniel, this is Martha Sullivan, my closest friend." Martha's assessment was swift and uncompromising. "So you're the son who didn't believe his mother was pushed down the stairs?" Daniel flushed, but met her gaze directly. "Yes, I'm trying to make amends for that and many other failures." After Martha walked away, Daniel released a tense breath. "Your friends are formidable." "They protected me when I needed it most," I replied simply. Daniel then shared surprising news. "I filed for divorce, from Vanessa. It was finalized last month." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "Don't be. It was long overdue. After everything came to light, I realized how much I'd surrendered my own judgment to hers, how I'd betrayed you to keep peace with her. And Jason, how is the custody arrangement?" "I have primary custody. Her career has always come first. She sees him every other weekend when it's convenient for her schedule. The bitterness in his voice revealed deeper wounds than I'd recognized. Perhaps, like me, he had been manipulated in ways I hadn't fully understood. The foundation referred us to Dr. Winters at Boston Children's, Daniel continued. She specializes in Jason's diagnosis. For the first time, I feel like we're getting actual help instead of excuses. I'm glad, I said sincerely. Would you consider meeting with him? In a therapeutic setting, with his doctor present? His question was tentative, expecting rejection. Dr. Winters thinks it might be important for his progress to make amends, even in a structured environment. I hesitated, conflicting emotions warring within me. The grandmother who loved a troubled child versus the woman who had been deliberately pushed downstairs. I'll consider it, I finally answered. Have Dr. Winters contact me directly. As Daniel prepared to leave, he turned back with unexpected vulnerability. I'm proud of what you've created, Mom. The foundation, your advocacy work. Dad would have been proud too, both of them. The mention of James and Richard, the two men I had loved and lost, touched something deep within me. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps its distant cousin, possibility. Rain tapped against the windows of Dr. Winters' office as I waited, hands clasped to hide their trembling. 3 months of careful preparation had led to this moment. My first supervised meeting with Jason since the confrontation. Dr. Rebecca Winters, a serene woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, had prepared me thoroughly for what to expect. Jason has made progress, she'd explained during our preliminary consultation, but his journey is just beginning. He started developing empathy, but it remains intellectual rather than intuitive for him. The door opened, and Daniel entered first, nodding encouragingly to someone behind him. Then Jason appeared, taller than I remembered, his face thinner, eyes wary. At nearly 11, he stood on the cusp of adolescence, that dangerous territory where childhood cruelty could either be redirected or calcify into something more permanent. "Hello, grandmother," he said formally, using the title Dr. Winters had suggested, rather than the more intimate, Grandma. "Hello, Jason," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. Dr. Winters guided us through the carefully structured interaction. No physical contact, no unscripted exchanges, no discussions of the inheritance or family conflict, just controlled communication focused on accountability and boundary setting. "Jason has prepared something he would like to share," Dr. Winters prompted after preliminary exchanges. Jason withdrew a sheet of paper from his pocket, unfolding it with unusual care. "I have written an accountability statement," he explained mechanically, "about the stairs." My chest tightened as he began to read. "I, Jason Matthews, acknowledge that I deliberately pushed my grandmother down the stairs on February 12th. I did this because I was angry that she suggested I needed boundaries. I knew it would hurt her physically. I lied about it afterward because I didn't want to get in trouble. When she got hurt worse than I expected, I was scared but also didn't care much about her pain." He continued reading, his voice flat but the content revealing. Acknowledgement of stealing my belongings, destroying my manuscript, tormenting animals, and taking pleasure in causing distress. The clinical precision of his admissions was somehow more chilling than any emotional outburst. "My actions show a pattern of harmful behavior," he concluded. "I am working with Dr. Winters to understand why I do these things and develop healthier responses." When he finished, he folded the paper carefully and placed it on the coffee table between us, then studied my reaction with analytical curiosity rather than remorse. "Thank you for your honesty, Jason," I said, following Dr. Winters' coaching. The session proceeded according to plan, structured exchanges, therapeutic interventions when needed. Careful boundary maintenance throughout. Jason's responses remained calculated, his participation performative rather than emotionally engaged. Yet there were flickers of something promising, moments when the script fell away and a real child peeked through the careful facade. As our time concluded, Dr. Winters asked if I had any final thoughts to share. "I want you to know something important, Jason," I said, meeting his eyes directly. "What happened between us doesn't define who you can become. You're young, with many paths still open before you. The choices you make from this point forward matter more than the mistakes behind you." For the first time, something unscripted flickered across his face, confusion, perhaps, or the dawning recognition that the woman before him was not the doormat he remembered. But you're still not giving back the college money, he stated flatly. Daniel tensed, but Dr. Winters held up a hand, allowing me to respond. The foundation money is helping many students, including some with challenges similar to yours, I explained calmly. If you continue your therapeutic work and maintain academic progress, you could apply for a scholarship yourself when the time comes. His eyes narrowed slightly, calculating this new information. So I could still get money for college? You could earn a scholarship, yes, based on merit and need, like anyone else. The distinction wasn't lost on him. For perhaps the first time in his life, Jason was confronting the concept of earning rather than simply taking or being given. After the session, Dr. Winters offered her assessment. This was productive, she noted. Jason's conduct disorder presents significant challenges, but I'm seeing incremental progress. His accountability statement, while emotionally detached, represents cognitive advancement in understanding causality and responsibility. Will he ever develop genuine empathy? I asked, the question that had haunted me since discovering the extent of his cruelty. Dr. Winters chose her words carefully. In severe cases like Jason's, emotional empathy often remains limited, but cognitive empathy, understanding others' perspectives intellectually, can be developed. With consistent therapy and appropriate boundaries, many patients learn to function ethically, even without the emotional component most people take for granted. Are you nervous? Martha asked, adjusting the collar of my navy blue blazer as we stood in the university auditorium lobby. 18 months had passed since that fateful fall down the stairs. 18 months of rebuilding, reclaiming, and reinvention. A little, I admitted. It's been decades since I lectured. Today marked my return to academia, not as the timid adjunct I'd become after marrying Richard, but as a visiting professor teaching a seminar on elder advocacy and autonomy to graduate social work students. Caroline had arranged it, convinced my first-hand experience would provide valuable insights beyond textbook theories. You'll be magnificent, Martha assured me, squeezing my hand before taking her seat in the audience. As I approached the podium, scanning the eager faces of 36 graduate students, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. This wasn't the frightened woman who had once been pushed downstairs. This was Professor Eleanor Matthews, survivor and advocate. Dignity isn't automatically diminished by age, I began, my voice strong and clear. Yet our society often equates gray hair with declined competence, creating vulnerability that can be exploited, sometimes by the very people entrusted with our care. For the next hour, I shared both research and personal insights on recognizing signs of elder abuse, establishing healthy boundaries, and maintaining autonomy as we age. The students' engagement was palpable, their questions thoughtful and probing. As the session concluded to enthusiastic applause, I noticed a familiar figure in the back row, Daniel, who had started attending therapy himself over the past year, working to understand the patterns that had led him to enable both Vanessa's manipulation and Jason's concerning behavior. That was incredible, Mom, he said as the room emptied. The way you transformed something painful into education for others, it's inspiring. Thank you for coming, I replied, genuinely touched by his presence. Our relationship remained a work in progress, cautious, bounded by careful respect rather than blind trust, but gradually healing through consistent effort on both sides. How is Jason doing at the new school? I asked as we walked toward the reception area. Better. The structured environment helps. His therapist says he's showing real progress in impulse control. Daniel paused, then added with careful honesty, he still struggles with emotional empathy, but he's learning to consider consequences before acting. They're calling it progress by proxy, doing the right thing even if it's not for the conventional reasons. I nodded, accepting this realistic assessment. Jason's journey would be lifelong, his challenges complex, but the critical intervention had finally happened. Later that afternoon, I met with the Second Chances Foundation board to review our expanding programs. What had begun with Jason's diverted college fund now included corporate partnerships, matching grants, and an endowment ensuring its continuation beyond my lifetime. The therapeutic education program has shown remarkable success, Professor Collins reported. 12 students receiving specialized support this semester alone. One of those students was Jason, though the board members, apart from Collins, remained unaware of the personal connection. His application had been evaluated by independent reviewers. his scholarship based on documented need and therapeutic progress rather than familial obligation. That evening, Martha hosted a small dinner party celebrating both my successful lecture and the Foundation's latest achievement. My chosen family gathered around her dining table: Carolyn, Beatrice, George and his wife, Professor Collins, and several new friends from my advocacy work. To Eleanor, Martha toasted, raising her glass, who reminds us that our third act can be our most powerful. As conversation flowed around me, I reflected on the journey of the past 18 months. The path from victim to victory hadn't been straight or simple. I still carried scars, both physical and emotional. Trust remained a carefully guarded commodity, given conditionally rather than freely. Yet the woman who had emerged from that crucible was stronger than the one who had fallen. More discerning in relationships, more confident in boundaries, more purposeful in actions. Later that night, alone in my home, now truly mine again in every sense, I stood at my bedroom window, gazing at the garden I'd replanted after they left. Spring bulbs were emerging, their tender shoots pushing determinedly through still cold soil toward sunlight and possibility. At 75, I had finally learned what had eluded me my entire life. That validation comes not from others' approval, but from honoring your own truth. That family can be chosen rather than merely inherited. That boundaries aren't selfish but essential. And that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply saying no more. Eleanor Matthews, I whispered to my reflection, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that statement felt completely, unquestionably true. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.